You know that feeling, right? You've made this amazing homemade pizza, you pull it out, smells incredible, and then you slice into it, and the crust is just, well, maybe a bit disappointing. Not quite that perfect crisp you were dreaming of.
Happens to the best of us.
It really does. And if you've been on that quest for the perfect crunchy pizza base at home, chances are you've heard about Cordierite Pizza Stones. And honestly, they seem like a pretty serious contender.
They really are. The material itself, cordierite, it's this mineral known for being super durable, handles really high heat, which is obviously key for pizza.
Exactly. But the really clever part, the thing that makes it work so well, is its structure. It's kind of like, well, imagine a really, really dense sponge, but with microscopic holes.
Right, and those pores are crucial. They allow the stone to soak up the oven's heat super evenly, radiating it back like a traditional brick oven. And importantly, they draw moisture away from the dough.
Which is how you get that amazing crispiness.
Yeah.
But that same porous nature, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It absolutely is, because while it's fantastic for wicking away moisture for the crust, it also means it can soak up, well, other things you don't want it soaking up, like cleaners or oils.
Yeah, it makes cleaning it a whole different ballgame compared to, say, a metal baking sheet.
Totally
Yeah.
different. You have to treat it differently.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've gathered a ton of expert advice, manufacturer guidelines, forum discussions, the works,
Yeah.
all about these Cordierite stones.
Yep.
And our mission is to really get into the nitty-gritty of cleaning and taking care of them.
Yeah.
We want to help everyone avoid those common pitfalls, keep their stones working great, and keep making awesome pizza.
And we're also going to tackle that surprisingly heated debate. Should you actually oil or season a new Cordierite stone? Because there seems to be a lot of conflicting info out there.
Oh yeah, that one pops up all the time. So whether you've had your stone for ages or you're just thinking about getting one, figuring out the right way to care for it, and especially whether to oil it, is pretty vital.
Absolutely. It's about getting the best performance, making sure it lasts, and avoiding some mistakes that could potentially wreck your stone. So yeah, let's cut through the noise and give some clear advice.
Okay, let's kick things off with the danger zone. What are the absolute cardinal sins? The things you should never, ever do when cleaning a Cordierite pizza stone?
Right. The big number one absolutely forbidden thing is soap or detergents, any kind of cleaning agent like that.
Why is that so bad?
Because of those pores we mentioned. That
Well-
porosity means the stone will literally absorb the soap, the chemicals, the fragrances.
Gross.
Yeah. And then the next time you heat it up to bake pizza, guess what flavor gets baked right into your crust?
Soapy pizza, not exactly the goal.
Not at all. And big names like Weber, Pizza Craft, they're really explicit about this. No soap, period. And just to be clear, we're mostly talking about the standard unglazed Cordierite here. Glazed ones might be slightly different, but for the typical stone, soap is out.
Okay, no soap. Makes perfect sense. Like trying to rinse soap out of an actual sponge, impossible. What's next on the do not do list?
Okay, next up is soaking the stone, or even just using way too much water when you clean it.
Because it'll just drink it all up.
Exactly. That porosity again, it becomes waterlogged, and that causes two main problems. First, a wet stone can't do its job of pulling moisture from the dough, so you're back to a potentially soggy crust.
Defeats the whole purpose.
Right. But the second reason is more serious. When you heat up a wet stone, all that trapped water turns into steam inside those tiny pores. That builds up internal pressure.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it can cause the stone to crack or even break apart completely. Weber specifically warns against soaking, and really, the rule is minimal water, as little as possible.
Yikes. Okay, cracking is definitely something we want to avoid. So minimal water, no soaking. What about temperature? I mean, intuitively, putting a really hot stone into cold water seems like a bad idea.
You are absolutely spot on. That's called thermal shock. Cordierite, while heat-resistant, doesn't like sudden, extreme temperature changes.
Like dropping an ice cube in hot coffee.
Kind of like that, yeah. Going from very hot to very cold, or vice versa, too quickly causes the material to expand or contract unevenly. That creates stress inside the stone.
Leading to cracks.
Precisely, cracks. Which is why patience is key after baking. You absolutely must let your stone cool down completely, and I mean completely, back to room temperature. This can take like 2, maybe 3 hours, sometimes even longer, depending on how hot your oven was.
Wow, that long?
Yep. Don't rush it. Only after it's fully cool should you even think about cleaning it with any water, even just a slightly damp cloth.
So no running a hot stone under the cold tap. Got it.
Definitely not. And the reverse is also true. Don't put a cold stone straight into a blazing hot preheated oven. You need to put the cold stone into the cold oven and let them heat up together.
Yeah, okay. Slow temperature climb.
Exactly. Same principle applies to putting, say, frozen pizza dough directly onto a hot stone. Bad idea. Even trying to speed dry a wet stone by putting it back into a hot oven can cause thermal shock. Slow and steady temperature changes are the way to go.
Slow and steady. Okay, now what about our modern kitchen helpers? Can I just bung my pizza stone in the dishwasher or use the oven's self-cleaning cycle? Seems easy.
Unfortunately, no. Easy maybe, but definitely not recommended. Given what we just said about soup and excessive water, the dishwasher is a double whammy of bad ideas. Harsh detergents, tons of hot water, exactly what the stone hates.
Right, okay, dishwasher is out. Self-cleaning oven.
This one's a little trickier because you might hear the odd story of someone doing it. But the overwhelming expert advice and manufacturer advice is strongly against using the self-clean cycle.
Why is that? It gets really hot. Surely that burns stuff off.
It does get incredibly hot, yes, much, much hotter than normal baking temperatures. And that extreme heat puts immense thermal stress on the stone. It's a prime way to cause cracking or, well, potentially catastrophic failure.
Yikes. Okay.
Plus, you don't know how any absorbed residues deep in the pores might react at those crazy high temperatures. There's a much safer way to deal with really baked-on gunk using high heat, which we can talk about later, called a controlled burn-off.
A burn-off.
Okay.
We'll come back to that. Sounds much better than risking the self-clean cycle.
Definitely safer. It uses a high baking temperature, like 500 degrees or 260 degrees C, but not the extreme temps of self-clean. It lets carbonized stuff break down without that massive thermal stress.
Good to know. So definitely steering clear of self-clean. Now, the big one, oiling, seasoning. Like you do with a cast iron pan. Should we be doing that with a Cordierite stone, especially before using it the first time?
Ah, yes, the eternal question. And it's a really common point of confusion, almost certainly because everyone knows about seasoning cast iron.
Right. It seems logical.
It does, but the straightforward answer for Cordierite is no, generally no. Oiling or seasoning a Cordierite stone, especially before first use, is not recommended by most experts and manufacturers. In fact, it can actually be counterproductive.
Counterproductive. How so?
Well, think about why you season cast iron primarily to prevent rust and create a nonstick surface. Cordierite doesn't rust, and its magic trick for pizza crusts is its ability to absorb moisture.
Ah, and oil would block that.
Exactly. Applying oil clogs up those crucial pores. If the pores are clogged with oil, the stone can't pull moisture from the dough effectively, which means no crisp crust.
So it actually stops it from doing its job properly.
Probably much. Plus, think about pizza baking temperatures. They're high. That oil is likely to just burn and smoke.
Creating nasty smells and maybe flavors.
You got it. And it can leave behind the sticky, gummy residue that's really hard to get off. Now, you might occasionally see someone suggest lightly conditioning it by baking something fatty on it first.
Like cookies or something.
Yeah, like buttery biscuits or cookies, letting the natural fats create a very light patina. But the overwhelming consensus is, do not deliberately rub oil onto the stone and bake it on like cast iron. That natural darkening and staining you get over time from just using it. That's the patina you want. It's a good thing, not something that needs fixing with oil.
Okay, so the patina is our friend, not the enemy. And definitely no pre-oiling. Got it. We've covered the don'ts. Now let's flip it. What should we be doing? What's the routine, everyday cleaning process after we've enjoyed our pizza?
Right, the post-pizza ritual. Step 1, and we can't stress this enough, patience. Let that stone cool down completely in the oven or on a heat-proof surface.
Back to that thermal shock thing. 2 to 3 hours, maybe longer?
Yep, at least. Don't touch it while it's hot. Once it's totally cool, step 2 is to deal with the big stuff. Any burnt cheese, bits of topping, crust chunks that are stuck on. You need to scrape those off.
Okay, scraping. What's the best tool for that? I've seen people use metal spatulas. Is that okay?
That's where you need to be careful. While some sources might mention metal, the safest bet, and what most recommend, is to use non-metallic tools only.
Like what?
Think plastic scrapers, nylon spatulas, maybe a silicone or rubber one. There were also dedicated pizza stone brushes that often come with a plastic or nylon scraper attached.
Why no metal?
Metal tool spatulas, bench scrapers, definitely wire brushes can easily scratch or gouge the surface of the Cordierite. It's durable against heat, but the surface itself can be relatively soft compared to metal. Pizza Craft, for instance, specifically warns against metal on their glazed stones. But honestly, it's good practice for unglazed too. You just want to avoid damaging that surface.
Okay, scrape gently with plastic or nylon. Makes sense. What's step 3 after the big bits are gone?
Step 3 is brushing. Get rid of all the loose crumbs, the excess flour or cornmeal, any smaller dusty bits left over after scraping.
What kind of brush?
A dedicated pizza stone brush is great, but you could also use a stiff nylon dish brush, maybe a firm vegetable brush, or even an old toothbrush in a pinch. The key is, again, generally avoid wire brushes to prevent scratching.
Scrape, then brush. Got it. Are we done then?
Almost. The final step for routine cleaning is just a gentle wipe down. Take a clean cloth or sponge, get it slightly damp, and damp is the key word here, not wet, and just wipe over the surface.
Just to get the last fine dust off.
Exactly. Removes any remaining fine particles or residue after the scraping and brushing. Microfiber cloths work really well for this final wipe, and just let it air dry before storing.
Cool. Completely. Scrape, non-metal, brush, damp wipe, air dry. Sounds manageable for everyday use.
Totally. That covers most situations.
But what about, the disasters? The cheese that basically welded itself to the stone, those stubborn black carbonized patches that just laugh at a gentle scrape. How do we tackle those?
Ah, yes, the tough customers. When gentle scraping and brushing isn't enough, you have a few options for a deeper clean. The first, and often most effective, is the baking soda paste method.
Baking soda. Our kitchen hero again. How does that work here?
It's pretty simple. You just mix regular baking soda with a tiny bit of water, just enough to make a thickish paste, like toothpaste consistency.
Not too watery.
Definitely not too watery. Remember our minimal water rule. Make the paste, then spread it directly onto the burnt-on food or the stubborn stain.
And just let it sit.
Yeah, for tougher spots, let it sit for a bit, maybe 10-15 minutes, or even up to an hour for really baked-on grime. The baking soda helps to break down and loosen the burnt stuff.
Okay, then what? Scrub hard.
Gently. Let the paste do the work. After it's sat for a bit, use a non-metallic brush like that nylon dish brush or maybe a non-abrasive scouring pad, and gently scrub the area in a circular motion. Don't go crazy with pressure.
Right. Let the chemistry work.
Exactly. Then wipe away the paste and all the loosened gunk with a clean, damp cloth. Now, if absolutely necessary, a very brief rinse under hot running water is sometimes suggested, but you must wipe it down immediately and thoroughly afterwards.
And the final, crucial step.
Air dry completely, absolutely vital after using any water or paste. Let it sit out until it's bone dry.
Okay, baking soda paste for stubborn spots sounds like a good weapon. What if even that doesn't shift some really black carbonized bits, like it's practically part of the stone now?
Right. For that really hardcore carbonized residue, you can escalate to the burn-off method we mentioned earlier.
Okay, remind me how that works again, safely.
Safely, yes. First, make sure the stone is completely cool and completely dry. Place the cold, dry stone into a cold oven. Then, set the oven to a high baking temperature, usually around 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius. Let the oven and stone preheat together, and then leave it at that temperature for about an hour after the oven reaches 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
And watch out for smoke.
Definitely. This process essentially incinerates the carbon residue, so it can produce smoke, especially if the stone is heavily soiled. Good ventilation is key. Open a window, turn on the extractor fan.
Okay, bake it at 500 degrees F for an hour. Then what?
Then, just turn the oven off. And crucially, leave the stone inside the oven to cool down slowly and completely with the oven. Don't take it out hot. Avoid that thermal shock.
Let it cool right down in there.
Yep. Once it's totally cool, hours later, you should find that the stubborn carbonized stuff has turned into a fine ash, and you can simply wipe or brush it away.
Ah, so it breaks it down.
Exactly. It's generally considered much safer than the self-clean cycle because the temperature is high, but not extreme. Still, it's probably best used sparingly, maybe once or twice over the entire life of the stone, if needed. Not a regular cleaning method.
Got it. A heavy-duty option for extreme cases.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I feel like I've heard people mention sandpaper. Is that the thing?
It is sometimes mentioned, yes, but really only as an absolute last resort. If you have some really persistent bumps or raised residue that just will not come off with scrubbing or burning, and it's genuinely affecting the stone's flatness or how you use it,
Then maybe.
then maybe you could try using a fine or medium grit sandpaper very, very gently, just on that specific spot. But you have to understand, it's abrasive. It will remove a layer of the stone and permanently alter the surface texture in that area.
So, Only if it's really impacting use and all else has failed.
Precisely. It's the break glass in case of emergency option, not for general cleaning or cosmetic reasons.
Okay, sandpaper is the nuclear option.
Yeah.
Hopefully unnecessary.
Now, moving away from the dramatic cleaning,
Hmm.
what about just general discoloration, grease stains? My stone definitely doesn't look new anymore. He's got dark patches, oily spots. Should I be trying to scrub those off?
The patina. No, absolutely not. Embrace the patina. That darkening, those stains, especially from oils naturally present in cheese and toppings, that is completely normal. It's like the seasoning on cast iron we talked about. So it's actually good.
It's totally fine. It doesn't affect the stone's performance one bit. In fact, some argue that a well-seasoned, darker stone might even become slightly more non-stick over time. So please don't try to scrub your stone back to its original pristine beige color. You'll drive yourself crazy, and it's pointless.
Okay, embracing the patina. I like the sound of that. Less work.
Definitely. Now, if you have a particularly heavy or sticky grease spill, that baking soda paste method is still your best friend. Apply it to the greasy area, let it sit for a while. Baking soda is great at absorbing grease, then gently scrub and wipe clean as before.
Baking soda for grease, too.
Yeah.
Okay, what about vinegar? I sometimes see that mentioned with baking soda for cleaning.
Yeah, you do sometimes see suggestions for a baking soda and vinegar paste. The fizzing reaction might help lift some things. It could potentially be an option for, say, exceptionally stubborn stains, maybe even mildew if that were ever an issue. But the primary recommendation is still just baking soda and water, mainly because you want to introduce as little liquid as possible. Vinegar is obviously liquid. So stick with the water paste first. Maybe consider the vinegar combo as a secondary option for really extreme cases, using minimal liquid and ensuring absolutely thorough drying afterwards. And definitely never soak the stone in vinegar. Far too much liquid, far too acidic.
Okay, stick to baking soda and water mostly. Got it. Now, drying. We keep coming back to this. After any cleaning that involves water or paste, how critical is getting it completely dry?
It is absolutely fundamentally critical. We can't overstate this. Any moisture left trapped inside those pores is bad news.
Why exactly? Remind me again.
Okay, multiple reasons. 1, uneven heating. Damp spots won't heat up at the same rate as dry spots. 2, soggy crust. A damp stone can't absorb moisture from the dough. 3, cracking risk. That trapped moisture turns to steam when heated, creating internal pressure, bang. And 4, potentially mold or mildew growth if it stays damp for too long in storage.
Okay, dry is essential. What's the only way to do it properly?
Air drying. That's it. The only truly safe and recommended method. After wiping it down, stand the stone upright, maybe in a dish rack, or just lean it against something in a well-ventilated spot. You want air to circulate around all sides.
And be patient.
Be very patient. Depending on the ambient humidity and how much moisture it might have absorbed, it could take several hours, maybe a full day, sometimes even longer if it somehow got quite wet. You need to be sure it's completely dry to the touch and feels room temperature through and through.
And definitely no trying to speed it up in the oven.
Absolutely not. Putting a damp stone into a hot oven is just asking for trouble. That rapid heating of internal moisture is the classic thermal shock scenario that leads to cracks. Air dry only. Patience is your friend.
Air dry. Patience. Got it loud and clear. Now, this is all great advice, but it's always reassuring to hear what the actual manufacturers say. What do companies like Weber or PizzaCraft tell their customers?
Good idea. Checking the manufacturer's instructions is always smart. Weber, for instance, pretty much echoes everything we've discussed, they say. Cool completely. Rinse with plain water. Use a plastic scraper for stuck bits.
And the big no-nos?
Same ones. Explicitly. No soap and no soaking and no dishwasher. And they emphasize avoiding thermal shock. They also reassure users that darkening and staining are normal and don't impact performance.
Anything else from Weber?
Yeah, a useful practical tip. Never store your stone outside, especially in cold weather. The cold itself, combined with potential moisture, can lead to cracking. They do offer glazed stones too, which might have slightly different preheating needs, but the core rules about no soap and avoiding thermal shock remain the same.
Okay, good alignment there. What about PizzaCraft? They make a lot of popular stones.
PizzaCraft is very similar. They make those Thumabond Cordierite stones. They hammer home the do not use soap rule because of the porosity. Their advice is, scrape off excess food, let it cool, run it under hot water while scrubbing with a brush, and then air dry thoroughly.
Hot water, interesting.
Yeah, hot water rinse and scrub seems to be their standard recommendation, followed by air drying. They also specifically warn against using metal tools on their glazed stones to avoid scratches. It's also worth noting their stones are often rated for really high temps, like 900 degrees Afer, which just shows how durable cordierite can be when treated right. They even sell their own cleaning tools, like brushes with non-metal scrapers, which supports that non-metal tool advice.
So across the board, the makers are saying pretty much the same thing. Be gentle, no soap, minimal water, watch the temperature changes, and let it dry naturally.
That's the core message, absolutely. Consistency is key.
Okay, perfect. Now let's circle back properly to that massive question, the one that seems to cause the most confusion: oiling or seasoning, especially for a brand new stone. We touched on why it's generally a no, but let's really dig into the consensus and the reasoning now.
Right. Let's nail this down. The overwhelming consensus, drawing from countless expert guides, chef recommendations, and manufacturer instructions, is that you should not oil or season a cordierite pizza stone before its first use, or really at any point in the way you'd season cast iron.
And the core reason is still that porosity.
Exactly. It's designed to be porous to absorb moisture. Oiling it defeats that purpose. Most sources strongly advise against it because the oil just soaks in, clogs the pores, and then burns and smokes at high pizza-making temperatures.
Offering little actual benefit.
Pretty much zero benefit,
Yeah.
according to most. Unlike cast iron, there's no rust to prevent. And the stone naturally develops its own seasoning, that dark patina, over time just from baking pizzas. That patina can actually make it a bit more non-stick anyway.
But what about those outliers? I know I've seen forum posts or maybe one article suggesting something like seasoning.
You're right, the advice isn't 100% unanimous, which is where the confusion comes from. A small minority might suggest a gentle conditioning, not really seasoning in the cast iron sense. This usually involves baking something high in fat on the stone for the first few uses.
Like those cookies or biscuits we mentioned?
Precisely. The idea is that the natural fats from the food create a very light, subtle coating in the pores, maybe helping with release initially. But crucially, this is not the same as deliberately slathering the stone in oil and baking it.
So even those suggestions aren't about rubbing oil on it.
Generally not, and even that bake something fatty tip is often presented as optional. The vast majority view intentional oiling as unnecessary at best and potentially performance harming at worst. Remember that user who said their oiled stone became like a cookie sheet, it lost its crisping power?
Yeah, that's a strong warning.
So the safest, most reliable advice, just skip any pre-oiling, use the stone, let it develop its character naturally. It will become more non-stick with use anyway.
Does this advice change at all if you have a glazed cordierite stone versus an unglazed one?
The fundamental advice, no pre-oiling, holds true for both types. Let's break it down.
Okay, unglazed first.
Unglazed cordierite has that raw, absorbent surface. That's its superpower for crispy crusts. It will absorb oils from your pizza toppings over time, and it will stain and darken. That's the natural patina forming. You don't need to force it by adding oil. That just clogs the pores needed for moisture absorption. PizzaCraft explicitly says no need to season with oil. If you're worried about sticking initially, just use a bit of cornmeal or flour under your dough.
Right, makes sense. And glazed stones.
Glazed stones have that thin, glassy ceramic coating. This makes them much less porous than unglazed stones. They're already relatively smooth and easy to clean. They won't really absorb moisture or oil in the same way.
So oiling them would be pointless.
Completely pointless and potentially messy. The oil would just sit on the surface, burn, smoke, and create a sticky mess when heated. There's nothing for it to season. The glaze itself provides the easier release and prevents deep staining, though the glaze might still discolor over time. Guidelines for glazed stones almost always say no seasoning or soaking needed.
So bottom line, whether your stone is naked cordierite or has a shiny glaze, don't rub oil on it before you use it, or really ever.
That's the clear takeaway. Unglazed seasons itself naturally with use. Glazed is basically ready to go as is.
Okay, crystal clear on the no oiling. Let's talk consequences again, just to really hammer it home.
Yeah.
If someone does oil their stone, what's the impact on performance in its lifespan?
Okay, performance-wise, the biggest hit is likely to be crust crispiness. A dry, hot stone works by drawing moisture rapidly from the dough. An oil-clogged stone simply can't do that effectively. You risk a soggier, less crisp result.
So it undermines the main reason for using a stone in the first place.
Pretty much. As for nonstick properties, a properly preheated stone shouldn't really cause sticking issues anyway. The intense heat sears the dough quickly. That natural darkening over time also helps with release. Oiling isn't necessary for nonstick performance and can actively hurt crispiness. Using cornmeal, flour, or parchment paper under the pizza is a much better strategy than oiling the stone itself.
And what about the smoke and smells you mentioned?
Yeah, that's another big one. Oil baked onto the stone at 500 degrees Fahrenheit or more is going to burn. That means smoke filling your kitchen every time you preheat the stone and potentially off-putting burnt oil smells and flavors transferring to your food. Not ideal. Some sources even suggest the oil penetrating the pores could potentially weaken the stone's structure over the long term, though thermal shock and moisture are the main culprits for cracking.
So for the best tasting pizza, a clean bake, and a long life for your stone, keep it oil-free and dry.
That's the formula. Longevity really comes down to avoiding thermal shock, keeping it dry, and handling it gently. The lack of intentional oiling won't hurt it. In fact, it helps it perform as intended. That natural patina might even make the surface slightly hydrophobic over time, which could help repel moisture and maybe deter mold, but that's a very different thing from saturating it with oil.
It seems like almost every authority agrees on this no-oil stance. Can you maybe give a few specific examples of what experts or manufacturers say?
Sure. We already mentioned Pizza Craft saying no need to season with oil or soak. They explicitly state it darkens naturally. Just cook on it.
Right.
On places like Home Depot's Q&A sections, you often see manufacturers responding directly, saying they do not recommend seasoning, just rinse and air dry, and it will season over time.
Right.
Serious Eats, a pretty respected food site, had an article by J. Kenji Lopez-Alk's colleague, Joshua Raub, explicitly asking, should I oil my pizza stone? The answer, a clear no. He explains it absorbs the oil, burns, smokes, and is unnecessary because a properly preheated stone won't stick.
Okay, pretty definitive.
Giordano's pizza chain even put out advice saying you should not oil your pizza stone, explaining it doesn't season like cast iron and offers no benefits, while the natural darkening actually improves release. They say, be proud of your stained stone.
I like that. Be proud of the patina.
Exactly. Another source, Gardening, etc., compiled advice from multiple experts who all concurred, no manual seasoning needed for Cordierite, just let it discolor naturally. They did note cast iron pizza stones are an exception, obviously.
So, a very strong consensus. Is there anyone reputable who actually suggests oiling? Any counter-arguments?
Well, there is one notable outlier often cited, which is Meathead Goldwyn from AmazingRibs.com. He suggests conditioning a stone with a very thin layer of a high smoke point oil, wiped on and baked.
Ah, so there is someone. What's his reasoning?
His goal seems to be creating a more hydrophobic, supposedly foolproof, non-stick surface. However, even he acknowledges this is controversial and not recommended by most manufacturers. It requires careful application, wipe on, wipe off excess, use moderate heat initially.
But it's not the standard advice.
Not at all. The vast majority of chefs, bakers, and manufacturers find it unnecessary. The prevailing wisdom is that you get fantastic results without intentional oiling, and you avoid the definite risk of smoke, reduced crispiness, and potential off flavors. Why take the risk when the standard method works so well?
Makes total sense. Stick with the overwhelming consensus. No oil. Okay, so if we're not oiling a brand new stone, what is the correct prep process? Step by step for that very first pizza bake.
Okay, super simple prep. Step 1. Unpack your shiny new stone, give it a quick rinse under warm running water, or just wipe it down thoroughly with a clean, damp cloth.
Just to get rid of any dust from manufacturing or packaging.
Exactly. Just removes any surface dust. And remember, absolutely no SOP during this initial rinse or wipe. Just plain water.
Rinse or wipe. Step 2.
Dry it completely. Towel dry it first, then let it air dry for several hours, or even better, pop it into a cold oven. Heat it to a very low temperature, maybe around 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees C for about 30 minutes. This just ensures absolutely all moisture, even from the rinse, is gone. Then let it cool back down to room temp. The stone must be room temperature and bone dry before you start preheating for pizza.
Okay, wash off dust, no soap. Dry completely, air or low heat. Step 3.
Preheat properly. This is crucial. Place the cool, dry stone onto a rack in a cold oven. Then set your oven to the desired pizza baking temperature, typically high, like 475 degrees at the air to 550 degrees, 250 degrees at 290 degrees C, whatever your recipe calls for.
And let it heat up with the oven.
Yes, always heat it up gradually with the oven to avoid thermal shock. And don't just wait for the oven to reach temperature. Let the stone soak up heat for a good amount of time after the oven is preheated. At least 30 minutes, ideally 45 minutes to an hour at temperature. You want that stone thoroughly saturated with heat.
Fully heat soaked. Got it. What about using a grill?
Similar principle for a grill. Place the cold stone on the grill grates before lighting it. Set it up for indirect heat. Close the lid and let it preheat for a good 15–20 minutes or more, following the grill and stone manufacturer's guidelines. Definitely avoid direct flame impinging on just one part of the stone.
Okay, proper preheating is key. Step 4.
Cook your pizza. Get your pizza assembled on a peel or an inverted baking sheet, lightly dusted with cornmeal or flour for easy sliding. Then confidently slide the pizza directly onto the hot stone.
No need to grease the stone or put oil on it first.
Absolutely no need to grease the stone. Don't pour oil on it. The intense heat of the preheated stone will instantly start cooking the bottom crust, searing it and causing it to release cleanly. Sticking really shouldn't be an issue on a properly preheated stone.
What if someone is really nervous about sticking the very first time?
If you're super worried on the very first bake, you can use a sheet of parchment paper under the pizza. Slide the pizza and parchment onto the stone together. You might want to carefully pull the parchment out from under the pizza partway through the bake to get better browning and char on the bottom crust, but it can provide peace of mind initially. Or just make sure your dough base is well floured, but honestly, the heat does the work.
Okay, bake the pizza. Then step 5 is...
Post-cook care. Once the pizza's done, leave the stone in the oven to cool down completely. Turn the oven off, leave the door slightly ajar maybe, but let it cool slowly inside. Again, avoid thermal shock.
Don't take it out hot.
Right. Once it's totally cool, hours later, do that routine cleaning we talked about. Scrape off any major baked-on bits with a non-metal tool, brush off crumbs, maybe a quick wipe with a damp cloth if needed. Still no soap. And remember, embrace those initial stains. They're the start of your stone's beautiful patina. Don't try to scrub it back to new. Just ensure no large food residues are left.
And then store it somewhere dry.
Yeah.
You mentioned some people just leave it in the oven.
Yeah, that's a really common and convenient storage solution. Leaving it in the oven keeps it dry, protected, and it can even help moderate the oven's temperature swings a bit. Plus, it's always there, ready for the next preheat cycle. Just make sure it's clean before you leave it in there.
That whole process seems much simpler than the whole oiling debate suggests. Rinse, dry, preheat long, cook, cool, scrape brush.
It really is straightforward when you understand the why behind it, respecting that porous nature.
So, wrapping this all up, the main takeaway seems crystal clear. Caring for a cordierite stone is fundamentally about working with its porosity, not against it.
Absolutely. Skip the soap, definitely skip the oil, handle temperature changes gently, let it heat up properly, embrace the natural patina, and always, always let it cool down and dry out completely.
It's genuinely surprising how that whole oiling question persists, isn't it? It really shows how easily we can misapply advice from one type of pitch and tool like cast iron to something totally different like cordierite. Oiling actively works against what makes the stone great.
Precisely. The stone's strength, its absorbency, is its defining feature for pizza. Oiling negates that. But hopefully, with all this expert advice laid out, people now feel confident. You've got a clear guide to keep your stone performing brilliantly, bake after bake, no more guesswork, no more fear of ruining it.
Absolutely. Delicious, crispy pizzas await. Now, thinking beyond pizza stones, this whole deep dive into cordierite care, uncovering the nuances behind seemingly simple instructions, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other common kitchen tools or techniques might have surprising details or debates hidden beneath the surface? What other bits of everybody knows kitchen wisdom might actually be worth questioning and exploring a bit deeper?
That's a great thought to end on. There's always more to learn, even about the tools we use every day.